And good morning, everybody. Hi, Ken. There is Miss Kate, I believe. Kate, are you online?
Okay, yes. I've been having some Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've been having some computer challenges.
Yikes.
Well, it's one of those things where I'm trying to decide, like, I feel like I probably need to, like, take it in because I'm getting some, like, little glitches. So, like,
Yep,
being proactive
yep. Yeah, you're probably
instead
right
of
there.
instead
Yep.
of like, "Oh, it's dead. Now what?"
That's what we do. And do you have a backup? No, 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 no.
Of course not. Yeah. I love those
Absolutely.
Apple geniuses. They're the best.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of hiring.
Speaking of hiring.
Awesome. Well, Guy is here from Houston. How about in the chat, some other folks where you're coming from today and how we're doing?
Yeah, how's everyone feeling today? We haven't asked that question in a while. What's one word that best describes how you feel? How
Kate, can you check your volume real quick on your computer? Just see if you might be able to jack that up a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Are you having a hard time hearing me?
A little bit. Yeah.
Oh, hold on.
I'm going to back my mic up so I don't drown you.
It sounds like my computer. It says it's using this computer.
Yep. Yeah,
It
it's
is.
just a little soft. Maybe that's just mine. We'll see. Maybe it's me.
Oh,
Oh, wait. Say something now.
something.
You're good. It was me.
Oh.
Totally. Turn my computer up. Yikes. All right.
I know. I was like, I don't think turning mine up is going to do anything for the
All right.
volume.
Just a reminder to everybody, we are live on YouTube, and Brooke Smith, I think, is probably going to put the link up here shortly if you're having any kind of difficulty at all. There it is. Right on top of it. Yep. Hello from Minnesota. Oh, Houston. Awesome.
Houston, Minnesota. Cool. California.
Excellent. Maryland and Nebraska. Wow, we are coast to coast.
Oh, I like it. Perfect. Oh, what is? All right, good. We'll get started in a couple of minutes.
Yep.
Like Tony said. So, kind of typical, as usual, if you guys want to ask any questions, just submit those in the chat box. Just put some question marks. Oh, yeah. Turn off all notifications.
Very good. Hello from wonderful, I guess it's Wisconsin and Westchester, PA. Awesome.
Nice.
Very good. I'm having trouble seeing today. Yeah.
People from all over.
Yeah. Well, are you feeling a little adventurous today? Because we have I want to show you something here. We're just a moment away, so I'm gonna share this. We'll see what happens here. I think.
Oh, okay. You're gonna do it.
We're gonna try. Let's see what happens. There was the intro.
We have an intro. All right, guys. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like that intro? We need some feedback.
Yikes.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. All right, good. Because everyone needs. Was that
Yeah.
cartoon?
Okay. Yeah.
Tony, a younger version with hair. That's right, Patrick. You got it. Oh.
Less
Oh
than
goodness.
3. Okay.
Oh
Wow.
no, less than 3. Oh, she didn't even want to give the she didn't want to say the number. She just
Yep.
wanted to say less than.
That's okay. We're not. That's an
Oh,
aberration data point.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. All right, so it is 12 o'clock. We will get started. Welcome, everyone, to another Culture Solution conversation. As always, we are so happy that you're here. I am Kate Volman, CEO of Floyd Consulting, and Tony is, as always, is joined. I feel like we need to be like in a studio
Yeah.
together, Tony. That would be awesome.
I have my bag packed.
Come down to Florida. So we thank you all so much for joining us. And as always, we're just so thrilled that you guys join us every week and sharing it with your friends and letting people know more about these conversations so that they can join us on the calls, or if they're not able to join on the calls, we have them sent out to you after the call, and then you can always find them on our YouTube channel as well. And Brooke had put the link to the YouTube channel, so you can always find us there. If you do throughout the presentation find yourself having any glitches from any, like, if there's sound or computer issues, then try to go over to YouTube. It's streaming there live as well. As usual, if you guys have any questions during the presentation, just put a little question mark, 2 question marks before the question and then afterwards, so we don't miss it, because there is an opportunity for you to ask questions. We love all the questions and engagement, so please let us know. And
There's a couple messages about the 6 principles, so I'm just putting it up again. If you want to download a copy of the 6 principles, you can do that now. They're just a little graphic for you, if you choose. So I'll keep that up for just a few more minutes.
Awesome. Love it. And for those, I mean, I believe most everyone has read the book. If you have not read the book, reach out to us. Let us know if you haven't read the book, because you need to read the book. There you go.
There it is.
All right, good. So today we are talking about Tony's favorite. I feel like it's Tony's favorite principle.
It's my favorite.
It's principle number 4: hire with rigorous discipline. This one is a good one. I
Yep.
mean, they're all so great, but we have to get the right people on our team if any of this
Absolutely.
stuff is going to
Right.
work.
Yep. Yeah, because
So,
like we say, most business decisions, or you could say most business problems, organizational problems, are who problems and not what problems. I mean, every time, even they disguise themselves sometimes as what problems, and then when you get down to it, it's most of them are who problems. So hiring,
right.
having a process is so very important, and the stakes are high. Most research indicates that one bad hire can cost you almost 15 times the salary of that person. So
crazy.
when you think about that, you want to take your time and have a good process in there, because there is a bottom line impact on that. And that 15 times, I was thinking about that, there's might be severance, might be illegal, but then also your time, your HR department's time, and then counting the effect on the organization is huge too. If the wrong hire cost you business, or the wrong hire prevents you from getting business, or just soils relationships, whatever that is, that can add up really quickly. So 15 times. And I think Peter Drucker said that even the best companies are usually hit about 50% on their hiring. So that's tough.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, that's why we're so passionate when we talk to people, especially when talking about training and coaching and investing in their people, because it can seem like a big investment, but it's nowhere near the investment that you're losing. It's nowhere near the money that you're
Right.
losing by
Yep.
hiring the wrong people.
Yep. And
And,
yep.
you know, American organizations spend $72 billion a year recruiting and hiring.
Wow.
$72 billion a year recruiting and hiring.
Yep.
You have to get the right people.
Right.
And you know what? It's not easy. It's not
Yeah.
an easy process.
And people, part of that resource in that 72 billion is people's time.
Yep.
And sometimes, I don't have time to have this process, but we always say, well, think of the time it's going to cost to work with a bad employee, and to remediate all the problems that come with having someone that's not the right person for the job. And that doesn't mean they're a bad, I don't mean when I say bad employee, a bad fit for the job. So if you don't think you have time to go through the process of a good hiring, that's either because you're spending all your time solving problems from bad hires you had before,
Yeah.
so or you haven't added up the impact. So yeah, so incredibly important. And it's interesting as we maybe talking about evaluating your hiring process. Why don't we just do the poll right away?
Yeah,
Just to see how
go for
people
it.
feel
Let's
coming in.
do
So
it.
I'm going to post this poll up here now. And basically, it's how you would rate your hiring process. Is it excellent and disciplined, pretty good and fairly disciplined, average, somewhat hit or miss, the boss trusts his or her gut, or no process to speak of, or the can you fog this mirror process for those things. So interesting. Less than, well, we'll let this take for a moment, but only about 5% of the people said excellent and disciplined. And then a third, pretty good, fairly disciplined, average, some hit or miss. And then 25% say the boss trusts his or her gut, or we have no process to speak of.
Ooh.
Yeah. So,
Oh, it's those gut decisions,
we
and
had that. It was talking to she, she was a professor actually, and she was talking about a very veteran professor. Was a school administrator, and said, well, look, I know, and if you've guilty of saying this, because I used to say it, I know she said, I know in the first 5 minutes whether I'm going to hire somebody.
yep.
Of which I replied, there's one of three things here. You have either been astronomically lucky, you don't have a clue what you're doing, or your bar is really low and you don't realize it. So, and
Or
it's
they
tricky.
just don't they don't have the process.
Absolutely. And when you don't have a process, then you can fall into these little statistical aberrations where you hit 4 in a row and you think, I got this. I can hire.
Yeah.
I've hired 4 great people in a row. I know what I'm looking for. And that fifth one will just crush you that you get
Oh,
wrong. And that's from experience. I know who I'm going to hire. I've had great hires and made some just really bad mistakes because I didn't trust my eyes and trust the process. So,
yeah. Yeah, there was a study, they said they took 200 managers, they interviewed 200 managers, and 33% of them indicated they know within the first 90 seconds
oh my
if
gosh.
they're gonna hire the candidate. 90 seconds. So, that's just
What do you do in 90 seconds? I mean, I guess I can see what you could do in 90 seconds to not get the job. but, but 90 seconds to get a job, that's
Yeah,
interesting. Yep.
it's so crazy. In fact, yeah, I just started reading Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, and it talks a lot about how like we make these judgments and we don't realize it. And so unless that's why, I mean, that's why the process, you got to trust the process. Trust the process. It's like you have to trust the process in so many things in life when it just seems easier to do it a certain
Yep.
way,
Yep.
but really having a strong process will eliminate the mistakes that you're going to make, because we've all made hiring mistakes, whether
Yep.
it's a gut instinct or not checking references. For those of you that are on the call, put in the comments, what is one hiring mistake that you've made over the years? What is one thing that when you look back in hindsight, you
Yep.
thought, oh my gosh, I should have
Not
known?
thinking. Yep.
Because that happens
It does happen. And there's
all
actually,
too
as
often.
some of these are going to come up, rushing to fill the position, not checking references. There's two of them. Trusting people. Okay.
Oh. Ooh, not
Trusting.
checking their social media.
That's interesting. 50, get this, 50, I just saw the statistic. 57% of companies survey say they found some, maybe I'm getting this wrong. On 50%, 57% of the time, they found something on social media that prevented them from hiring the person.
Wow.
Over half the time.
Wow. See, people, social media. Oh, Jeremy wrote, this is a good one. Choosing a mediocre candidate instead of waiting to hire. This
Absolutely.
one is so common among
Yep.
leaders because we don't want to keep doing, especially when it comes down to a couple of individuals. You
Yep.
don't like either one, and you're thinking, let's choose the lesser of the two evils. And then you choose that person, and you knew it wasn't the right person.
Right.
But what's the alternative? The alternative is opening up again to get a whole new pool of people. It just sounds exhausting, but
Yep.
it's less exhausting when, or it's more exhausting when you have the wrong person. You have to figure
Right.
out what to do with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, someone speaking about, blatant information. We actually, feel like there's, if you categorize 10 things that folks do, I'm not going to go into detail, but 10 things, 10 mistakes that, that folks make. And, just very quickly, lacking role clarity. So we're going to talk just in a moment about having a role description and a scorecard. Focus on filling the role. I've got to get this role filled, and someone spoke to that in terms of doing so quickly. My favorite is talking too much. The talking too much. I'll speak to that in a minute. Hiring from a pool. So in other words, this is the pool of people we got. These are the resumes we have. I've got to hire one from this pool. And you were kind of referring to that, Kate, where this is what we have. And particularly when it comes to our best candidate says no, or we don't get them. So the next candidate becomes the best candidate, and that's not always the case. So,
Yeah.
Yep. First impression bias we talked about, neglecting references. Although, the research indicates that 87% of companies say they check references. There's a whole nother, but checking them and check boxing is two different things. And we're going to speak to that a little bit. Hiring for the wrong reason. It's my nephew or I owe somebody something, those things. Having an inconsistent process, having an unprepared hiring team. So, there can be a danger of wanting to bring people in, but you just bring them in for, hey, can you sit in on this interview with me tomorrow? And that's all the person knows. So that's important. And then also one thing of is hiring out instead of hiring in. Is there an internal candidate who can grow into the position or might be suited for it, but they don't get a chance? So those are kind of 10 mistakes. But in general, if you wanted, we ask you to rate your hiring process, there's a real simple way to do that by just asking the two questions. I mean, if you ask yourself, if I look at the people that are currently hired, would I hire them again? And the second one is, we say the folks that, if some of the people you're not, if the people on your team came to you, or if someone came to your team and quit today, how would you feel? And those sound really simplistic, but I was coaching somebody yesterday, a leader, and had some turnover, a couple of surprise turnovers, and was a little worried about how that looked. And when I asked that question, would you hire those people again? She spent a moment, she goes, I wouldn't. I didn't hire, there were 3 of them. I didn't hire any of them. And I was working with them to make them better. but I feel like I'm going to hire. I've already hired up for 2 of them, and I know I'm going to do that on the third. So just asking those questions, would I hire these people again? And how would you feel if the person came and quit? That's a
Mm,
pretty telltale sign. And usually when
yeah.
we ask that question and somebody's struggling, they're like, oh my God, my day, I'd walk out and call it a day and, go do something real fun. But that's just what happens. So
No, and that's a good point in the sense of when you're talking about hiring, you're hiring your people every day, every week, every month. And so it's important when you're thinking about the hiring process to really look at your current team as it is right now, especially over the past few months. I know some teams have really had dramatic shifts, whether they've had to let people go or they're hiring. And now I know
mhm,
I was just talking to a leader yesterday. They're super excited because they're ready to get back into the hiring
yep,
process, and they realize that some of the people that they did let go, they aren't bringing them back because they
right.
really aren't the right person for the team. And so when we really think about looking at your team like that all the time, like quarterly, and really just always in the back of your mind asking those two questions that Tony just said, that's a great way to make sure you constantly have the right team. You
Yep,
constantly you're not ever kind of getting all these things, don't just kind of um get this snowball effect of, oh my gosh, it's been 2 years or 3 years or more, and this person is the one person in the organization that
right.
just drives you nuts.
What are we doing here? Yeah, absolutely. And same thing, coaching a CEO, and he made the point. He said, they had to do some reduction in force and some layoffs. And he said, this is just bringing to the forefront something I didn't, and he used the word, I didn't have the courage to do.
Mm,
Or didn't have the impetus to do before this. So the shutdowns and things were actually an opportunity to judge your hiring process. And we'll speak to that a little bit more. But it's interesting of those reasons. The main reason in general that organizations are bad at hiring. Now, it's funny. Sandra and I were doing a workshop together, a training together, and I had the slide and she had the slide, and her slide said the number one reason is most organizations are bad at hiring because they're not disciplined. Mine said most organizations are bad at hiring because they're lazy. And she said, but the two are the same. And she was just a little nicer in putting it that, but I put it that way to kind of drive the point home that if you're not going to invest in that, it's lacking discipline or just being lazy, and that's the number one reason. Because ultimately, I mean, Kate, what are you trying to do in hiring? Who are you trying to get?
you're trying to get A players,
A players, right? A
only A
players.
players.
Only A players. Your hiring process, and people all the time ask, what's an A player? And it is a little subjective, but objectively, we like to say this, that an A player is somebody that has a 90% chance of being in the top 10% of what they do. So in evaluating your team, does this person have a 90% chance? It's almost a certainty of being or becoming a top 10% person in what they do. And that speaks to your idea of evaluating team. We're not saying go across your team and just start firing people. Because if someone's, you have to judge, can the person become an A player?
Yeah.
And that's where coaching comes in. So if the person has the potential, you coach them, and otherwise you hire, into position. So I'm curious. Why don't we do another poll while we're at that? So let me put another poll up here with that definition. Now, you may have had an idea coming in of what an A player was, but with that definition, a 90% chance of being in the top 10%. Let me get this poll up here. What percentage of your team currently, however you're defining your team, are A players? 75% to 100, three quarters, 51 to 74, 50%, 25 to 50%,
Ooh.
1 to 25%, or none of them, excluding me, of course.
If Tony's on your team.
Yes. No, or the person answering. I don't want to. Now, if you're going, I'm not an A player. Okay. Wow. That's a little bit of a bell curve, but actually, almost even across 25, 50, and 75.
25,
Almost a third of the people say, yeah, up to 3/4. Another third say up to a half, and the other people say somewhere between a quarter and a half. And then the 10 to 13% on the fringes.
Oh,
Very
see,
interesting.
Ivana says 90% because Ivana has an awesome team and she's also a dream manager and helps her team become A players.
Absolutely.
So that's how that works out.
Awesome.
Because that is, like we talked about with when you are looking at your team, like that's the distinction with the description that Tony just gave for A players is you can coach them up. If your people are coachable. In another call, we've talked about the 3 qualities to look for in a person is committed, coachable, and aware. That's what
Yep.
we do at Floyd. You can steal that and use it yourself, but knowing that someone is coachable, that you can really push them to get to that level, then you have the right people on your team. And so this is actually a really great exercise to do
Yep.
with your team. So we don't have the slide, but Tony, do you want to talk about the 4 quadrants? Because I think this is a great exercise once everyone's done with this call to
Yeah.
fit everyone on their team in one of these quadrants.
Right. Absolutely. So a quick way, if you just, and we actually have people go through this exercise and guide them through it, but a quick way, if you think of a quadrant and if one of the sides horizontally is a person's what kind of cultural fit are they, and the other side so this is cultural fit, and up and down is how proficient they are at their job. So obviously, if it's in that first quadrant, you have people that are really good at their job and great cultural fits. And then that's where you want to hire to. Those are your complete A players. The other quadrant 4, kind of diagonal, are those folks who, they're not good at what they do and they're jerks. So that's an easy one to deal with too. That helps you right there. If you've got people in there that's going to be toxic to your culture. Those other 2 areas are tough. And I think we talked about this before, that you can have people who are very good at what they do, but they're really toxic to your culture. And we'll discuss what maybe down the road, what you do in that situation. And the other one is this is just a super great cultural fit, but they're not very good at what they do. So that's a tough one too. Can I grow this person, or do I help this person find something that they have a great chance to succeed at? So those 4 quadrants are important, and it's a great time to do that. Just like Kate, you said, our 3 things. I've been telling CEOs this opportunity when you were shut down. This was a chance to evaluate your hiring process. Also, do you have the right 3 things? Because,
Right.
if somebody has to work at home or has to be flexible, whatever, those 3 qualities that you said people have to have, if they weren't important in the past 3 months, they're not important. It can't just be, it's important when everything's easy. Those 3 qualities have to be enduring. When sales are up, when sales are down, when there's not a global pandemic, and when there is a global pandemic. So that's for the search for those 3 things. So just leading right into that, the first thing you have to do is figure out what are the 3 things that are most important, a characteristic of people. And then from there, you create that role description. And we talked about before, not a job description. People behave differently when they're on a mission, rather than when they just have a job. So kind of moving us forward a little bit, if you want to start this process, you need to have some role descriptions that say, what does this role do in accomplishing the mission of the organization? Now, guess what? To do that, you have to have a company mission. Otherwise, you can have job descriptions, but if they don't tie to the to the company mission, are useless. So you've got, this just goes back to why these 6 things are so intertwined. You have a mission, you create role descriptions. What role does everybody have in the mission? And people should be able to say what that is, and then kind of where you're hiring to. I'm going to go just real quick on one thing that came up, and I'm sure some folks say this because I hear this a lot, is the question of, well, is the person, we're trying to find the best person we can afford. Well, we work with some nonprofits, and it's interesting there's this, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but sometimes nonprofits get evaluated by, how much of what giving goes to administrative. And there's this misnomer that when people look at these ratings, oh, this company spends so much on salary or so much on benefits instead of towards the mission of this nonprofit. But that's, if you want to be successful, you need to have good people. So I think if you're in that position of, we want to find the people we can hire that we can afford, then I think you need to reevaluate, could I do the job of 2 people with a superstar A player and pay them more, or have 2 substandard people and pay them what we can pay them. So, if you're sourcing right, you can find the right people. And if you've got the role descriptions right, otherwise you just spin your wheels. If you can't pay people, if you can't find the right people, now you got to go back to your mission. Can we do what we say our
Well,
mission is?
and another thing that is important to consider when it comes to things like that is that just comes down to a cultural fit, right? Like there's a lot of studies that show that money is not the most important thing
Absolutely.
for
Yep.
people in a position.
Right.
Now, for some, it is. And it's truly like that's their core value. Like that's something that's really of most value to them. Like they want to
Yep.
just make a lot of money. So depending on your organization, that might not be a good fit for your mission. Right. So,
Right.
like, you have to take all of these things into consideration, which is why it's so important during the interview process. You do have a cultural component to the interview process.
Right.
What are people's dreams? What is important to them? What do they want to leave in the world? Because for a lot of people, they will absolutely work for an organization with a strong, clear mission that they
Yep.
believe in and take a little less pay than working for this great startup or tech company or whatever the industry, and they're making 6-7 figures,
Yep.
but they don't have any kind of passion in their
Right.
position. So you have to really understand the value to each person in the organization and what makes sense for you. I mean, maybe you run a company where it's all about money, but most of the organizations out there that do extraordinarily well, they have like we keep talking about, they've got that clear mission and vision.
Yep.
And they attract those people because those people are excited about being involved in that mission. Hopefully they're making good money at the
Yep.
same time. But hey, that's why so many nonprofit organizations have these leaders that are just so committed to
Yep.
the mission, and it's not about the money.
Sure. Fit, future, finance, family, all those things go into those F's in terms of why people take jobs. So, so with that, there's I think one of the values that we really provide people is in this next. So we've got role descriptions and helping consult with companies in creating and the process creating scorecards, because a scorecard is actually the guardian of your culture. The scorecard forces you to define who the person is that you want to hire for the role. And in doing so, you're ensuring your culture, because you're ensuring that you're hiring A players that have cultural fits. So we don't have time today to go into exactly all the details of scorecards, but I know that the companies that we work with, they talk about this just transformation in their hiring process once they started creating scorecards. Once and so what's a scorecard? So in essence, a scorecard very simply is you create, just as it says, a way that it says, what's the mission of this role? So what's the mission this role has as it relates to the mission of the organization? What are the outcomes, and what are the competencies the person has to have? So when you think about, and outcomes is a little different, that if you're hiring a salesperson, for example, that scorecard would say, this person can increase, we expect this role to increase sales by 25% over 2 years. That's an outcome. And so as you're interviewing people, you use that scorecard to see how people match up with can they fill the mission of this role? Can they produce these outcomes? And do they have the competencies to do that? And so scorecards have been transformational, at least in the the companies that I know that we work with, of just changing the process. If you're talking about, well, this department does it this way, this department does it, implementing these scorecards gets people in a mode of clarity that, as I said, people just say it's transformational. So, and you've
Yeah.
probably seen the same thing, right, Kate?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was just talking to a woman the other day who she's in business with her. It's a family business, so there's lots of other challenges that they deal with that dynamic. But she and her mother were having a conflict of a person, and she just kept going back to, well, she thinks that this person should stay and I think she should leave. And it was all about like the feeling and the emotion behind, like, the girl was like, I feel kind of bad about letting them go. And so I brought it back down to, well, are they fulfilling the role description?
Yep.
And she was like, "Oh, we don't have that." And so by, this alleviates so much. Not only is it great for obviously for making sure that you're getting the right person, but now this is an opportunity for them to like get rid of so much noise and distraction from these other arguments that they've been having
Right.
within the organization. And so clearly defining what those role descriptions, it helps us. It's so freeing. It's
Yep.
so freeing. And going back to your point on the slides of being disciplined or lazy, whatever it is, it's it's a hard process to sit down and
Yep.
identify exactly what you want every role to accomplish. It takes a lot of time.
It does.
And so often we see leaders just say, well, I need to hire a VP of sales, or I need to hire a new HR person, or whatever the case. And they just, oh, I'll just Google HR job description and put it out. Or we have to be strategic
Absolutely.
in
Yep.
our hiring process, and we have to be strategic in those descriptions. They have to fit us and our organization
Right.
and fit the mission.
Yep.
So Googling a great scorecard, it'll give you some ideas of what it looks like, but
Right.
you have to decide what are those, 5 or 6 things that you're going to evaluate your people on every
Right.
single year, every single month,
That
every
is
single quarter.
absolutely the key point, because there can be this separation between the hiring and what's the next principle, letting people know what to expect. One of the values, the enduring values of the scorecard, is it's not just used for hiring. It helps you transition then into the evaluative process with an employee, which makes, so it's like blows my mind that I actually am going to hire someone and tell them this is what we want to have done. And then I'm going to use that same criteria to evaluate them. And so it's actually, you're getting a twofer there. What do people struggle with? They struggle with hiring the right people, and they struggle with evaluating people. This speaks to both of those things, and it makes it perfectly clear, because we often talk about treating people like people. Well, it's not right to hire somebody on one premise and evaluate them on another premise. And that happens all the time, because this is our interview process. And, okay, I'm going to get a little sarcastic here, but, in the interview process, if I ask you if you were a tree, what kind of tree were you going to be? And then I fire you because your sales were down 10%, right? There's a disjoint there. If it's important that the guy is an oak, then evaluate whether or not he's an oak at the end of the quarter. But if it's important that he increased sales by 25%, then those are the things you should be asking on your scorecard. So now we're getting a lot of questions about examples of scorecards. I think, that is one of the things we work with people on, kind of creating that template. But if you just wanted to start, then those 3 elements: write the mission for the job. What do you want to have done with specifics? What needs to be accomplished? What are the outcomes? And then if somebody's going to accomplish those outcomes, what do they need to have? So if you're hiring a programmer and this role, they're going to create in JavaScript these tools for our website, then the person better be fluent in Java. And so tie those, it sounds simple, but you tie those things together. So without giving a template, again, those things we work with, but that's it. If you can do that, you're well on your way.
And
So,
I would just add too, to gain some clarity around that on your scorecards, think about if you're going to put 5 things that this person needs to accomplish, think about how can you make them smart? How can you make them specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound? So think about SMART goals when you're putting these things together, because this way, when you're meeting with your team, whoever it is with that scorecard, you can actually look at that and say, yes, you've done this, or no, you haven't. There's no conflict of, well, I've kind of gotten sales here and there. No, if you have a salesperson, by what percentage are they trying
Yep.
to increase the revenue every quarter, or how many leads do they need to get every week, or
Right.
whatever those numbers are that are important to you. And again, this goes back to being strategic and making sure that it's for your organization. What and that's why it takes so much time.
Yep.
We have to figure all this stuff out in order to create a good scorecard.
Right. Absolutely. And so, we've kind of dove into the nuts and bolts of, of what it was, starting the kind of the technical part of the hiring process. Two things we're not going to talk about today, but maybe we will, that kind of sandwich those are, how do you source for new people? Because I'm seeing some comments, and I was just reading some from someone else that, how do we source? Well, we go to Monster, or we, whatever it is, we take the resumes we get and we hire from that list.
Is Monster still around? That's like old school.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It was on my MySpace page. I knew it was anyway, or Indeed or whatever. Okay. Right? For my hiring service. And
from a fellow podcast listener, I would think ZipRecruiter would be. I thought ZipRecruiter would be like
ZipRecruiter. Okay, that should have been right in my mind. You're right. Okay, I'll take that.
They're not a sponsor of Culture Solutions.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yes. Monster was. That's why they're out of business. But so anyway, we can spend some time maybe on another show about sourcing. But but I'll tell you this: if you're just one little tidbit, if you want good people, call the best person you know at that job and ask them if they're interested in the job. And if they say yes, fantastic. If they say no, say, okay, I understand, but let me tell you, who are the 3 best people you know at that? And they'll give you names, and they'll probably give you names of people that they just had a conversation with, a person thinking about leaving another job. So anyway, we can talk a lot about people. I did want to put this is kind of an informal poll where if you could just agree or disagree to this statement, right? The greatest indicator of future performance is past performance. Agree or disagree. For a candidate, the greatest indicator of future performance is past performance. I'm interested. Agree or disagree? We'll see.
Let's see.
Not greatest, but counts. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Agree. Oh, there's
good. This is what I wanted. Yes, a little bit.
Lots of disagrees.
That's okay. Agree with qualifications. Okay. Okay, so a lot of disagrees. Okay, so if that's the case, now maybe you're disagreeing because I said the greatest, but I said that for a purpose. Let me just ask this. I'll ask this rhetorical question, so you don't have to fill this in here. But once you create a scorecard and you start interviewing people, and you want someone to increase sales by 25%. Or I know I keep using sales because it's right there and tangible, but it could be you want someone who is a receptionist or director of first impressions, and you want someone who makes a home run impression with people the first time they come in, right? Whatever the role description is, and whatever the scorecard is, right? The question becomes, how do you know the person can do it if they haven't done it before? Now you could say potential, but then, I would ask, are you going to hang your career as a hire person on the potential that someone has? So it's not a completely hard, fast rule, but when we start talking about interviewing, one of the mistakes we said people make is talking too much in an interview. The real simple advice we give to folks is to just shut up in the interview and listen. And I say that part of that experience because I'm a talk through an interview. The point is, okay, one suggestion for interviewing that first round, after you do the screening interviews, which are phone interviews, you find out if it's a match or not. You're hitting the gong real early on people if they're not a match. But when you get it down, when you get to the next step, okay, these 5 people I think have potential, to sit down and say, so tell me about your last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs, whatever they were. What were you hired to do? And did you accomplish it? Now, hopefully something they say in there aligns with what you're asking them to do. Now, there may be some transference, like, okay, the person sold hot water heaters and you want them to sell, computer chip or whatever that might be. It might not be the same thing, but if the person had a sales goal and met their sales goal, then they've demonstrated they can do that. If the person who you're hiring to be at the front desk tells you, this was my last job and how did it go? Not real well. I don't like people, whatever that might be, you can find that out. So that first round in the interviews, I think people always talk too much instead of asking, so tell me about your last jobs. What were you hired to do and did you accomplish them? And then you have to listen to see if what they're saying matches up with the outcomes that you want and the qualities and characteristics that you want. So that's why I said about past performance. There's got to be something that indicates that they can do what you're asking them to do if you want to be real smart and get over that 50% threshold that folks struggle with. So
yeah. And I think too with the questions, that's why, see, this is why it's process, and this is why it takes time to put together your hiring process. Because when you think about those questions, those kind of clarifying questions, because that's kind of like the open-ended question to get them starting to talk. But then you have to follow up with so many questions, especially just kind of to Tony's point on the salesperson. If you're talking about the salesperson, great. Did they meet the quota? Awesome. But like, then you have to dive into, well, where did you get your leads? Like, are you in an organization where you get leads in, or does this person need to go out and get their own leads? Like, you have to think through all of those other factors that would make this person, and then they need to give you the examples of how they were able to do whatever it is that you would need them to do, because that's especially going to in a sales role, finding that actual rainmaker, that person that really does sell, that's really tough. It's really tough. And you can find people that are like part of making the deal or being involved in the deal, and probably everyone, you might have 5 people that are involved in a deal. Everyone on their resume put that they're the one that closed the $32 million deal. And when really it was mostly one person. So figuring out all of those other questions to ask the right person, to ask the person, to get them to really be honest and truthful. And the other thing about having that role description as part of your interview process, if you have a role description and it has those exact things that person's going to need to accomplish, and you let them know, hey, when we do your quarterly reviews, this is what we're going to look at when we're meeting. These are the things that you're going to be responsible for. You're going to get rid of those people that can't do that.
People this saves
they don't want to be
so
held accountable.
Time, and you are right. You need the follow-up questions, but you'd be amazed at how many people will answer the questions just by what they say and save you so much time. If someone either can't tell you what they did before and how they had success, or it's a mismatch, or they'll just keep going. And here's the other thing, by listening, people start to trust you, and I hear this all the time. People say what you want them to say in an interview. Well, that's true. If I'm interviewing Kate and I say, well, hi, I'm really glad you're here. I want you to know right off the bat, one of the things we really value here in our employees is collaboration. So tell me about yourself. Now, if she has half a brain, the first thing out of her mouth is going, I tend to be a very collaborative person. Right? Obviously, that's what they want. But if you just let someone talk and listen and don't interrupt, they're going to tell you things. They're going to tell you what was wrong with their last boss. And they're going to tell you all these things that if you let someone speak. So that's a big thing. Get those questions. And then, the last of those questions is, so tell me about your last job. What were you hired to do? How did it go? And what will your manager say when I talk to him or her about it? Not what would, what will. And then you get the folks who, who suffer from what's it called? Fear of reference check. Okay. So um, and an interesting thing about that, when you ask about that, I heard that like an A player, when you ask about, what would your manager say, your last manager say about your ability to do this job, the A player would say, well, I think they would be, I'm sure they could confirm this. As a matter of fact, I've kept in touch with them. Here's their number. The B person says, well, I haven't really talked to him in a while. It might be kind of tough to get a hold of them. I'll see if I can, get, because they weren't on my reference list. I'll see if I can get it. The C player says the person's dead. Okay. So that's how you know a C player. So, and I just want to kind of stress this a little bit. One of the reasons that I think these steps are so important is because admittedly, I am not a good interviewer and not good at hiring people. So I'm coming from the standpoint of, I mean, if you think you're great at it, you're not, but go ahead. Okay. But I'm just telling you, if you just follow the steps, it takes out all the things you think you have to do, and people are just going to eliminate themselves. You're going to find those things out. And so a screening interview, what did you do? The who interview, what did you do and how did it go? What would your manager say about that? Then you can bring in people on the technical side. Just heard somebody the other day said, yeah, this person talked to, we said one of the things was that they could, they could work in Excel to create these reports. That was an outcome. Create these monthly reports in Excel by doing macros and And, had the question simply been, do you know Excel? Yeah, I've worked in Excel. Well, they brought in someone from that department who started asking them real specific questions. And it was apparent that the person knew that the little icon with the X on it on their screen was Excel, but that was pretty much it. So, you could you go into the formal part where you actually have some, ask specific questions by people on your team so that you can further phase that out. So, if you have a match, then, if you have a technical match, and then you get into this idea of a cultural interview where this can be another interview, a lunch, whatever it is, with folks in your organization where you're asking some cultural questions to find out, do they approach problems the same way? Do they treat people the same way? One company was at Southwest Airlines. They have a set group of Uber drivers they use to pick up candidates at the airport. And then, so the person comes in, and after the interview, they call these Uber, say, how was that person?
Oh, that's
The person was a
awesome.
jerk, didn't tip me, didn't do it, or didn't talk, whatever it was. And so, that's one way to get kind of to the cultural part of it also. But, just want to stress that folks, if you ask questions and be quiet, people will tell you who to hire.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we had done years ago in a role that I was in, we were looking for when we needed someone to do our communications, and they needed to, get out the newsletter and put together flyers and all that kind of stuff. It was the same thing. We were getting everybody, of course, everyone's applying for this role. They all say that they have Adobe and they know how to use all the programs. So what we started incorporating that really helped, because we had made some bad hires, was we would give them a certain list of things that they needed to accomplish, and we would put them in a room and gave them like 30 minutes. And we'd say, hey, you have to write a press release and create this document or whatever the things were. And then it was very clear if this person was able to do it or not, because we didn't need to hire a graphic designer that was going to take 5 hours to do a quick, simple flyer.
Right.
So that really helped us with finding some of those right key people.
Yep.
And then one of the things, going back to your tree question, because that reminded me of a friend of mine. So my friend that owns this company has a great team. And he says at the very end of the interview, he asks the question, I'm probably not going to say it right, but you guys can get the gist of it. It's, if you could only have, what superpower would you choose? But the superpower that you choose, it has like a negative, a negative effect with it, right? Like if you choose mind reading, like now it's like, that's not the best because now you're like, you know everything someone's saying. So they asked that question, but it wasn't because they just wanted to throw out these
Right.
crazy questions and be a cool company like Google or
Yep.
or Amazon by asking these ridiculous questions, but it was more about their culture was
Right.
one of fun
Yep.
and like everyone's on their toes and like they answer just they're just funny and fun. So that's one of their
Yeah.
values.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
it was very purposeful. So
Yep.
when you're going through your interview questions, especially the cultural ones, again, there's so much that we can get online and Google like best interview questions, but making sure that it's true to you and the
Yep.
company as a whole and fits your culture and the role, like that's what's really most important.
Yep. And yeah, you're exactly right. That would be the point where you can ask those questions. And I'll just go back to when we talk about this being a daunting process, just by asking those simple things that we've talked and listening, you don't have to ask that many questions. That's the other thing. People think I have to come up with this list of interview questions. Let the person talk, and
Yeah.
then you'll figure out so much more about the people. And so as we start to get closer to the end, a couple of things come out about references. As I mentioned, most people say they do a reference check, but just a couple of things about that. I mean, if you're going to ask someone in a reference check of asking them, okay, in what context did you know this person? What were their biggest strengths? Where did they need the most improvement? And how would you rate their performance, 1 to 10? And what did they struggle and then, because if you're asking the person who you're interviewing, what were your struggles, or they told you what their struggles were, then you can say, Tom mentioned in our interview that he struggles with this. Can you tell me more about that? Now, if that person says, oh, that's exactly right, and he's not telling you half the story, and I got a bigger problem, or, the person says, that's really not that big a deal. I mean, yeah, occasionally, but they got better at it. Now, you can address those things too. So reference interviews are not a waste of time, provided that you don't just rely on the references people give you. That, you're going to, I know as you go up in some of the executive interviews, there's some sensitivity towards the current job and those things, but in general, you should be finding some references that the person didn't give you that are directly related. And you can do that and then asking the candidate to help you set up those reference calls. We're very interested in you right now. Could you call your past manager and see if we could set up a call with them? And that's where you get to the person. If the person goes, uh-oh, and runs from the room, then because there's a warrant out for them, then but that was just asking a question. It wasn't saying, is there a warrant out for your arrest? You simply said, could you help me set this interview up? And if the person doesn't. So and I know from an employer standpoint, this is another thing that I go round and around with people about, so reference checks are a waste of time because no one tells you anything. Well, just know, and I've done the research on this, most states, the law is on the side of the person. If you're saying something that's true, you can't get in trouble. You typically cannot get in trouble for providing honest information about a past employee rather. But everybody, well, you can't get anything because no one says anything. And that's just not true. And I think you have a moral obligation to let people know. I know of, I work in education, and I know of dioceses who have a policy that if you call and ask about a former employer, you're only allowed to say, yes, that person worked here from this date to that date. And I went round and round with somebody on that. And I'm saying that is immoral, because you're not saying the person was good. You're also not saying the person was dangerous. And what does that do when the law is on your side? And so, anyway,
And
so
little
reference checks are not,
disclaimer, we're not giving any
nope,
you
legal
need to
advice.
check with your
Yes,
legal team
absolutely.
and
Right.
lawyers and whatever you need to do before you get on those calls. Because I was
Yeah, that's a good point.
I was speaking at a event with it was for a hotel corporation, and they were very like their HR
Yep.
team is like on point. So there's a lot you have to
Right.
make sure you're not
There
asking
are,
things you can't
and
ask. But you know what I find, and I don't know if others feel the same way, but I find that people, when you're on the end, when someone calls you for a reference, or when you call someone for reference, there's been many times, even when they feel like I can't really say anything, when you ask, would you hire them again? Or people are people don't want you to make a bad hire because they
Right.
know how hard it is. So
Yep.
most people try to say something that, like, you guys kind of have this secret
Yeah.
knowing of what they're trying to say, and maybe they just can't say it. So and another thing too is, like, sometimes what has happened is you call the reference, and the person that gave it to you, they think it's a really good reference because it is. Maybe this person did a great job for them. But the questions that you ask, they're able to say, even when they say to you, like, they did a great job because of XYZ, there might be some things that they say in there
Right.
that are like, "Ooh,
Right.
no, that's actually not the kind of person
Absolutely.
that we
Yep. Yep.
want."
You know,
So
they
again, it
didn't work
goes.
in a team, but I could set them aside and they got the job done, but they could not work in a team.
Yeah.
So I had to make him move down the hall, and those, well, okay, that's some things that are
Right,
going
like,
on.
if they
Right.
were like, "Oh, this person was, like, the best rainmaker." Now, he couldn't get along with anyone, but,
Right.
there are certain things
Yep.
that that'll come out of a conversation where the person actually thinks they're praising them, but you're getting a lot of data back from the way that they are as a person and
Right.
as a worker.
Yep.
So,
So that's a great point, Kate. I'm glad you brought that up. I get a little passionate about that. I am not an attorney. But
yes,
I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express a
dis
lot this winter.
dis
So, but,
disclaimer.
so
Yeah,
let's start to wrap this up real quick. That okay,
yeah,
let's say you went through, you sourced really well, you did phone screen interviews, you asked the person what they did, how'd they do, what would their manager say, you asked some real specific technical questions with your team, you had them do a culture interview, and then your references check out, and you get to that point, and you bring everyone together and see how did you rate them on the scorecard. A, B, C's, D, whatever that might be. Now you're faced with this. If you have multiple A's, these 4 candidates, well, that's great. Rank them, hire the best. If you've just got one A, well, this is the person, then you start to sell them. That's the point you sell your company. And I'll just say that's the mistake that people make, is they try to sell their company instead of asking the person about themselves. And that gets in the way a lot. Now's the time to sell the company, make an offer to that one person. And you alluded to this earlier, though, it's going to happen. You go through the process and you don't have a clear-cut A candidate. If you can resist the temptation to bump the B up by default, you're going to be better in the long run. That may mean you say, you know what, I'm not offering this job to anybody. We're going to go source some more. That can, on one hand, that can be deflating. And I was coaching at an organization where they were like 8 months into this and 4 rounds of interviews to find the person. And when the case, oh yeah, everybody was so deflated. I'm saying, you should have had a party and said, isn't that great? We didn't hire these 3 people. We saved ourselves so much aggravation down the road. Isn't that great? We found that out. And now let's get back to another round. So I'm being a little facetious, but at the same time, it's important to not raise somebody up because the water sank or whatever around that. So that is tough. So anyway, we've talked about a bunch today.
yeah.
Just be quiet when you're hiring. That's my, and I'm probably projecting myself on this way more than I should. However, when you get down to people and you do mock interviews, that everybody talks way too much. Now,
Yep.
what is that? What is that a characteristic of? Oh, let's talk about principle number 6. What's a great coach do? Ask great questions and be quiet. So things just tie together here. We've tied a bunch of things together today. We've tied mission to hiring. We have tied hiring to evaluating, and we've tied hiring and interviewing to being a great coach. Seems like somehow these things are linked together.
And also let people know what you expect.
Absolutely.
We've hit them all. And making culture a priority, right? Like making sure you have those good cultural fits.
Yep.
All right. So before we jump off, can we just put in the chat box, what is your one takeaway, your one aha moment, one way that you're going to change your hiring process?
Yep.
Put that in the description. We want to hear what you're doing, because we hope that you don't just come on here just to come on. We hope that you're getting some feedback and are able to take some of these things away and incorporating them into your world.
Absolutely. And when you think about the that 15 times number, and when you talk about investing in training, where do you want to put your money? Do you want to put your money in learning to come up with a process on hiring and have, somebody like us help through that? Or would you rather say, I'll take my chances and spin the wheel and see if it comes up 15 times what I was going to hire somebody?
Mm. Well, like Tony said, this is what we do with organizations. It's one of the things that we do with our coaching. We're able to go in and we work with a lot of different leaders that are trying to figure out their hiring process. And so we do that through our coaching. Obviously, we do a lot of training. So please, if you haven't yet done so, click on that button. It's up there, right? Yep. To speak to a Floyd coach. We would love to hear about where you are in the process, where you are in your organization, and how we can better serve you through our coaching, through our training, through our speaking. So please hit that button so you can speak with one of our consultants. Go ahead.
Last thought. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there, Kate. But this has happened on multiple occasions that we've engaged with people and been training with them, and they'll say the same thing. I don't know that I could have got hired today at our company. So
that's scary.
Exactly.
Good thing they made it right under before they
they were saying, this is really thorough and this really has some clarity around it. So awesome.
That's awesome.
Great.
All right, good. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. As always, we love having you here. We love spending these Wednesdays with you. Please continue to share this with your colleague and friends. We want to help to, obviously, our mission is to grow people, and you, just by being on here and sharing our message, you're helping us fulfill our mission. So we're so grateful for that. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 12.
Awesome. All right.